Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs. But that does give us a clean segue into what we're going to talk about today, which is... Oh, come now.
So obviously we've mentioned a few times that we're considering like our own setting slash game slash that kind of stuff, which is why we've started this series looking at kind of the different parts that make up a role-playing game. Presumably by the time this drops, you will have heard our episodes on dice mechanics, and then we will talk about which dice mechanics we are core mechanic rather. And then we're thinking we'll do character creation and combat and helm and whatever else, equipment. That's always bad.
Yeah, no, we'll hit on the
Magic,
different,
but
I'll say, like, depending on what we talk about in part today, the different major, like, silos of rules that need to be done, depending on the nature of the game. So you proposed then, we've talked about dice mechanics, and we've got plenty more that we need to nail down and talk about, but you proposed that each of us talk about the general game setting, game like story idea that we're thinking about, and then we will return to that with trying to connect some mechanical ideas to those things.
Yeah, kind of being the idea that as well as us just kind of talking about here are all the different kinds of ways you can make a game.
Yeah.
Then there's also, right, well, here's what the ones we prefer for this particular purpose, but for that, you need to know what our purpose is.
Right. Yeah. So today is the purpose. In other words, what kind of game are we considering making? I think it should be pretty obvious by what's over my shoulder. Less obvious for you. Would you like to start?
No.
No? Okay. Well, why don't I start then? All right.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You start, yeah.
So I have been kicking around the idea of a horror game. I've always liked horror. You and I have talked about horror as being a really challenging genre to run over the long term, and so my idea would be to build a system or build a game. How's that? Which includes systems and setting and story stuff. A game that would be good for one-offs and good for short, limited story arcs. That, and I think that's what horror does really well. It has the vampire moves into your neighborhood, or you're the monster hunters and you've gotten a tip on something in this town, or whatever. And there is a specific thing to deal with, and that's either dealt with in one session or a short arc of sessions. So there's no sense on my end that this would be something I would not make this for long campaign play.
Yeah.
The other thing two other things that I'm interested in trying to develop in this is that I want it to be like setting wise, I don't have a time period. In other words, I'm not like, I want this to be in the 19 whatevers or the 18 whatevers. Or what I would like it to be is portable to one of several different time periods within American history, because my focus is like classic monsters and American folklore and ghosts and stuff like that.
Well, it's American history. That's only like 100 years anyway, so that's
a little more than that. But I mean, we go back to the 18th century, or like maybe the mid to late 17th century, and that's where we stop. So I have a limited scope, but the idea is that, yeah, you're right. The game could be played in, for example, if you wanted to play during the period of, like early 1800s westward expansion, if you wanted to play during the Civil War, if you wanted to play during the Gilded Age, if you wanted to play during the 1980s or the 1950s, I have a number of different eras or like era event periods that I'm interested in, and I would like the game to be, you could choose where you'd want to engage with it. So that's one thing. And the other piece is that I would like it to be like a kind of like action investigative. So not like the heavy academic type egghead investigation that Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, Call of Cthulhu defaults to. Not that. Not everyone's going to be an antiquarian, in a library going mad. I don't. In fact, actually, and one of the limiters in this, I want no cosmic horror. Like no mythos Cthulhu. That stuff has its place, but I'm kind of tired of that.
Yeah. Also, it's
But
very well served.
yes, it is.
So, I mean, it's a weird one because basically, from what I can see, Cthulhu is like open light. If anyone wants to do a Cthulhu game, you
Yeah,
can just do a Cthulhu game. But by the same thing, it means everyone has done a Cthulhu game. There's a lot out
true.
there, so it's not exactly fertile
Well,
ground for
it's
making these role
saturated,
playing
and I think
games.
like I like gibbering amorphous blobs of tentacles as much as anybody else does, but I just think there's a point where it's we've hit peak Cthulhu.
Well, I feel
So
like there's definitely a gap in the market for another horror game now because you've mentioned things like Chill, but Chill is one of the games like you might have heard of it in passing. When it comes to horror games, there's Cthulhu, but if you don't want to play Cthulhu, what else is out there? Well, there kind of isn't
there isn't much.
really.
And there have
Um,
been games like Chill First Edition 40 years ago imploded because the game company imploded because of apparently like some embezzlement that was going on. Like someone within the company like ran off with a bunch of the company's money and the company went bankrupt. And then that property was bought by Mayfair and lasted for a short period of time. Chill Third Edition lasted for a short period of time. And supposedly there's a Chill Fourth Edition in the works, but it's supposedly been in the works for years. So you're right, there is a gap in that like classic monsters, classic horror. And there are some niche games, like Colonial Gothic is one, but that's only during pre-revolution and revolutionary. That's like late 18th century only. I'm thinking anyway, more broadly. But so I want a balance between investigation and action. So if you were, it would be like a horror movie, where there's some investigation and then you have to confront, or the beastie confronts you multiple times, or an episode of Supernatural, something along
yep.
those lines. So that it's not just, you know, it's not guns a blazing, which is like every other game in some way, shape, or form, and it's not like I said, just poking through a library. A balance between those two. And my last thing is that I want to work on a what I would consider to be like a workable fear mechanic. Call of Cthulhu does sanity fine. Chill
Oh,
Third
what do you mean?
Edition tried to do fear in different ways, but I think they way overcomplicated it. Like they differentiated sources of fear into terror, horror, revulsion, like all these different kinds, and it got really murky and complicated. The panic system in Aliens, I think, is totally broken, or some other way of mechanically and narratively dealing with fear instead of just saying
Yeah.
you're scared or you run away or you lose some points. It
I mean,
has to be something else.
Alien kind of worked, but I think part of the problem is you didn't have the control over what was going to happen. So what would be nice is if actually you could create ahead of time, my character is most likely to sort of panic and shut down or run or go berserk. What you could have is
Right.
any character could do any of that stuff. And I mean, for me as a GM, I loved it because usually what happened is someone went they panicked and they got killed by the aliens, or they went berserk with a gun and started shooting all their own mates, which gave them stress. And then it's just this big stress, sort of like just cycle that just everyone's getting stressed all the time until everyone then dies, which was great because I was perfectly happy doing that. I have to I think Alien was the most antagonistic game I felt running as a GM because I felt like once things started going wrong, it was doomed. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never not had a TPK playing it. That's not even true. I've never not had multiple TPKs
Yep.
playing Alien because usually it's like your characters are dead. Here, have the other characters. Oh,
And it's
they're
going to
dead
die
as
too.
well.
Yeah.
Um,
We
but I've had
always had
fun
a,
doing that. But yeah, yeah, it's not. It could be
we
better.
always had a really hard time, like in the Destroyer of Worlds campaign, the idea that elite colonial marines flip out when they fire their weapons on fully automatic is that's just stupid. So there has to be some way that I do think there should be room in some places for the GM to say, okay, this is what happens to your character, like in an extreme situation. This is how your
Yeah.
character reacts. But like I said, it's got to be. I want to come up with a workable fear mechanic. So investigation plus action, good balance. Work in multiple time periods in American history, and have a workable fear mechanic. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want to build.
What kind of, so you said you're not doing cosmic horror. What kind of bad guys are you thinking of doing?
Well, I mean, you've got ghosts. You've got
Yeah.
ghosts, hauntings, possessions, creepy demonic stuff. And then there are plenty of just weird lore.
Okay, like say urban, no, not urban myths,
Urban,
like
well, it
some
could be,
myths.
it
Yeah,
depends. Could be like urban legend stuff. Could be like, the Mothman, the Jersey Devil.
yeah,
There are
that
all
kind of stuff.
kinds of strange, throughout American different regions, almost like where I'm from, there had been a story, and it still pops up every once in a while, of a ghost car on this old highway outside of town that would like drive the wrong way down a highway and freak people out and stuff like that. So things like that. Um, that's what I'm thinking about. So this would put me in the position where I would have to do some like lore research into different things that have popped up in different eras. Witches is easy,
Yeah,
especially
yeah,
earlier in American history. And then obviously just classic monsters. You've always got room for a vampire. There's always room for a werewolf. There's always
yeah.
things like that. Banshees. All those Irish immigrants come over and they bring banshees with them. What about you?
I
What are
guess you
what are
weren't
you
doing
thinking?
that, so I locked it.
What about you?
Uh,
What are you, and what do these multiple worlds behind you? What does that represent?
yes, well, I'll get to it in a minute. So this, because I was going back and looking at like, because I've had ideas for things in the past. So I'm going to go run through some of the kind of vague ideas, which are the past. I was like, this is the thing. If I'd had the time to take any of these dies out of more than like an initial pitch thing. So I want to run over these ones. So yeah, because I was looking, I knew I had one on my blog where it literally, if you go to 2D20 system on my blog, there's a thing called God War, which sounds very impressive. And it has two articles, and one is like a breaking down of the different ways you can split up like deities' powers, like D&D stuff. Like literally, I would say, domains like you have in 5e. And the other one is a quick setting premise, and it's like it goes into more detail than I thought I'd ever done. But the short version is like all of the old with the Asgard and the Egyptian and all of those gods. All of those are real, and they've been hanging around in the background for ages. But there's like rules that say they can't fight on Earth, so they like have avatars, or they give their powers to humans who then can fight out there, whatever wanted. So bits of Scion and bits of other things. But like this is an idea I had. Ooh, what's the date on this? 2018. So that's what, 6 years ago? Wow, ancient history. Still an idea I quite like because I still always like the idea of like I just like all the Egyptian gods and the Norse gods and the Greeks and the Romans and
Yeah,
all that
yeah.
stuff. I
So
like that kind of stuff, but obviously you can't play as them. But I'm like I put this thing as like, oh, it could be in different time periods, so you can literally like you've got. So I've got this whole bunch of time periods, like the obvious like ancient ones, but then also like Renaissance and then like modern day, but then going way into the future.
So would you be
Uh,
playing these avatars or like these deputized, powered up human
Yeah, so the thing I've
henchmen?
written here is that there's like the people that aren't gods, but are like various other elder things. And I've literally written titans, primordials, and elder gods have like made some pact with the gods, who I guess aren't as powerful as those crazily powerful things to say, like, right, you have a limit to how much stuff you can do on Earth. And they've created an agency that oversees the gods. And so I think the thing I've got, the players work for the agency. They are given missions to stop gods making a complete mess of Earth. And you play one of these avatars. But I did this after I'd played Infinity, trying to have an idea where like you would be working for an organization, but then you might also have secret objectives for like your original pantheon that where you got the stuff from. But this is the thing. This is an idea I haven't looked at for ages. I like the idea of having something to do with the gods in the background, but that's as far as that's gone, and I haven't really gone back
Okay.
to look at that. But it's one of those things that I come back to a lot. I like the idea of the god still being around. That's why I bought a lot of science stuff over the years because like the idea is good, the reality is like yeah, because
Well,
there's so many different ways to do it. It's awkward.
it sounds interesting though. So the idea is that you've got all these different pantheons of gods that are doing some things,
Yeah,
and the characters are working on behalf of, at cross purposes to, against, parallel to. I could see a lot of, powered up quasi superhero ish action, but I could also see uh, like Indiana Jones style, artifact hunts, magic, um, and a lot of intrigue. Interesting, actually. I mean, I think one of the one of the great things about Vampire the Masquerade is that it it was one of the first games that it may be the first game that I played that really put front and center the idea of like political intrigue. And that can
Yeah.
be really interesting as an ongoing theme within a game story. And I think you could definitely have that here. And there obviously we have gobs of source material of, the Greek gods and, trying to stab each other's in the back and whatnot, and the Egyptians, and that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of after I'd played one of the thing we most enjoyed about playing Infinity was the secret objectives that your players would have. So you'd be working for, oh, I can't remember who you're working for, but whoever you're working for in Infinity, as well as the mission you were meant to be doing, you would have an objective from like your home planet, or if you were a criminal, you'd have
Yeah.
a secret criminal objective. So that always made it kind of fun, that as well as doing the main thing, that like for the good of everyone, there's like this other side thing you're doing because you're a bit dodgy. So I liked that idea. I'm still, it's like because this is literally just me going back to an idea that I wanted to look at. Because the idea of the thing I really want to run is not this. This is just, and I went, there's bits of this I quite like. The picture I've got up there is because I knew that I'd started doing something else, and it turns out I've got, I have a logo which I'm not putting up. I'm not doing the name either. But I put this thing is a created multiverse setting intended for RPGs and inspired by character focused IP like MOBA, video games, superhero comics, and anime. And that I've like got so I've basically I've done a logo, which again I'm not doing over in case I ever did this. I want to keep the name secret, but it's like, wow, I've done a name, and I've got some art, and then literally the extent of my setting thing is prime. This is it. This is super obscure, and I can't even remember. And it doesn't come too far away of the thing I want to talk about. Prime worlds have people with spark, which grants them powers or skills that set them apart. Copy worlds also have people with spark, but they are alternate realities that are based on the prime worlds. I know where I was going with this, but blank worlds have no spark, and battle worlds are worlds that are being fought over by other different worlds. This is an excuse for me to do stuff where people just fight each other from different multiversal realities with like just so I can find out. Someone goes, I want to play a cowboy. Another person goes, I want to play a space marine. And the other person's like, I want to play a dwarf barbarian. Right. You can all play together. The kind of setting that you hate. But then it
Yes.
wouldn't be a kitchen sink setting because it would be people are out of, they're going from their reality into someone else's. So it's not Rift where everything is in one, or Shadowrun where everything's in one. It's those are separate settings, except for you're plucked out. I don't know, because that's as far that's it. That's all I've got. I was like,
Yeah, so wait. So
why have I spent more time on
are you
art than
trying to
I have?
squeeze in on me two games here and I only have
No,
one?
no, I'm no. This is the thing. You asked me for two settings. I'm giving you things that I've written in the past, and then I
Oh,
want to talk about the thing that's always rattling around in the back of my head, which I really want to do. But it's more. These are like I kind of vague setting sort of pretenses. As usual for me, I have an idea of what I want the character to be able to do, but I have no setting to go with it. So these are settings. This is in the looser sense of the thing. But that's where this multiverse thing comes in, because I like the idea of people being able to have completely different stuff. Because a lot of the stuff the kind of things I play, like um, things like League of Legends, where like they've come up with a setting to try to justify why the characters are so wildly different. Why some guys are barbarian for the ways, but some other people have incredible technology, and someone's a straight up android. This doesn't make any sense as a setting. This is ridiculous. But then they
well,
try and make sense of it.
does this sound might this be might this be a better like minis or card
100%.
game than an RPG because the setting disappears. The setting actually is a few lines that justify the contact between these bizarro characters,
Yeah,
but it
I think
actually
that I was
isn't important. It's just a lever that allows these two to beat on each other.
I think I was starting to write this. I was coming up with some ideas so that if I wanted to write a thing, I could write something set in one world. And then if I really liked one of those characters, but then wanted to write something else, I could pick that character out and stick him in another world with a justifiable reason, because there was a multiverse where
Okay.
you could have done it. The other thing I was looking at deliberately on purpose is having multiple versions of the same character, so same personality, but in this world, let's say we'll go with hardboiled detective. But hardboiled detective in one thing is a monster hunter, and because it's in the 1800s, and in this other thing, it's a noir thing, so it's actually much later, and he's driving a cool car and has a trench coat, and then it's a cyberpunk thing, but it could be the same character throughout because these are all copies of the original. But again, so that's just a setting thing. Okay, it's just completely in the background. The kind of thing I want to have. Okay, and this is why I don't have any setting for it. I have ideas that I like. I
Okay.
I I want to be able to have a system, and again, because I come from the system point of view rather than the setting, I don't have a setting to go with it. This is why I was just running through these. These are ideas that I need to
So
pick one and
so
land
tell
on
me
it and
about the
stick with it.
system idea.
So what I want and kind of category, I want a system which can't create superhero level characters, but sort of like something below it. So not average Joe, okay, not superhero, but the kind of that level in the middle. So
Chuck
things
Norris?
like, yeah, all right. So just meme Chuck Norris.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe not that far because meme Chuck Norris is like more powerful than anyone.
Well, okay, so then like top level Chuck
But yeah,
Norris.
yeah. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Like the kind of when I've watched anime things and think, oh, that's really cool. Because a lot of anime characters, they have like a thing. They can do this one thing, which
Yeah.
makes them really cool. So that kind of level. Or or people who are just really crazily skilled. So Batman people who's not, Batman isn't Superman. He's really clever and he's really good at fighting. He has all this cool gear. But that's his thing. His thing is that he's rich. And yeah, his thing is that he's rich. Um, you want a thing that is very character focused and like, but each of the characters are completely different. So it can't be basically what I don't want is super. I don't want people flying around, but I want people to be able to do cool stuff or have really cool equipment or they can do magic, but it's very narrowed down. Like they just do fire magic and that's it, which actually I don't see in a lot of role playing. Like you look at D&D and, any kind of wizard in D&D can do every spell. There's no thing to be. I think a close thing actually would be like, Avatar. Not blue people Avatar. Like
Yeah, yeah,
proper
Airbender.
Last
Yeah,
Airbender.
you yeah. Unless you're the
Um,
Avatar, you're in one lane.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That kind of level. You're moderately powerful people, whether that is because they have a cool pet or they can do some cool magic. They're incredibly well trained, or they have a magic item or something that falls into that kind of thing, which lets me do lots of the kind of media I quite like. Things like Horizon Zero Dawn, where it's like it's set in the future in an apocalyptic world, but there's giant robot creatures walking around, and the main characters are actually just people who are just good at doing what they're doing, but the setting's cool. It's that kind of that I don't have a setting. This thing, I like this bit from here, and I like this bit, but I want a character to
Yeah.
be able to do this thing. It's essentially I want something that when I have seen some cool thing and I've gone online, go right, can I have a system that lets me play X, Y, or Z? And people go use a superhero system. I'm like,
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
it
want a
what's
superhero system. I want something that's like not that level, but is
yeah.
more powerful than. And people go,
Well,
well, you try this anime system. Oh no, because anime systems are always for start. They're not a thing. They have
yeah.
anime art in, but
Well,
then
but
there's no
here's the thing
decisions
though,
made.
and I guess this is so I understand what you're saying and it makes sense like the idea of these the type of characters and that would imply based on the types of powers they had the sorts of things they could do, but I guess what you need is the in what context and why,
Yes,
because without
that's the
that
thing.
like
This
that's where I
yes,
it makes me think of either a cooperative or a competitive like skirmish game or minis game. Then you don't have to all you have to you just need an interesting setting like oh yeah it's the floor is lava, that's where they're having their fight or something like that.
but exactly
But
that's why
yeah,
I need some kind of idea of a setting that can tie all this together.
yeah.
Which is my like multiverse idea is just an excuse for I can put anything into it, but even then that is so there's no setting there.
Yeah,
It's
the
some
trouble with
pictures
it
and
is
an
that there
idea.
isn't you have the pieces, but there isn't any kind of like baked in motive force that says this is the kind of story that it would
Yeah.
you do.
So this kind of thing. So I've had, I mean, because I've come across with looking at other things, something like The Strange, which is
Dumb.
yeah, because it was super vague. It was
Yeah.
like,
Well, it's a
basically
cipher system too, which blows.
any kind of it's a literary thing, right? Well, that exists somewhere because it's been written in a book. There is that setting exists somewhere. Okay, cool. But what do the characters do?
What if
And
okay,
then they never explain it. So
I
I need a setting which is tying things together.
okay, what if because I'm
Which I
thinking
don't have.
multiverse. You have multiverse. What if there is like I'm making this up as I go. Okay. But this at least initially seems to make some sense, or could harmonize all these pieces that you're talking about. So if you've got powered up, not superhero level, but better than mortal, like
Yeah.
at least minimal Batman level
Yeah.
in terms of like, yeah, we all know Batman's mortal and he has lots of equipment, but really Batman still does things that your regular human can't do. So that level, or maybe a little bit higher. Okay. You have this multiverse. You have all these pantheons, all these human pantheons. What if you had some kind of multiverse force of entropy? That is, the force of not chaos, call it entropy.
Entry
And
works.
it is unraveling reality. And so there is and I again, making it up as I go, so the details are escaping me right now, but that there are some of the gods recognize this, like, hey, we squabble amongst ourselves, like, Ra and this person that within the Egyptian pantheon, like, Zeus, and Zeus is always having problems with someone within his pantheon. And then
Usually
there's
because he
people who have
shagged
problems.
someone's wife.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. And then and Poseidon's like, whatever, I don't want to know. But and then you have pantheons have problems with other pantheons, but then there are some among those who are like, whoa, 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 there's a much bigger problem here. And so then you could have the politics and the action of these different factions that either maybe some of them agree with, or are unwitting agents of entropy, whatever it would be called. But that these mortals who have been powered up by the different pantheons would be the agents that would be used by some of these deities to like fight entropy. Like in a way, it would, I think, very loosely analogous to like Werewolf the Forsaken, Werewolf the Apocalypse.
I know what you mean, but I
You know
can't
what I
remember
mean?
what it's
Yeah. So
called.
there's like there's the evil force that, and of course it's some big like corporate-y type or something like that. Whoosh, it's all the people who have factories, because all factories exist to do is make sludge. They don't make anything else. They just make pollution. That's all factories do. And that you are, so you're the enviro warrior, and you're all fighting against this thing. But that some of the different werewolf types, like there's that challenge of like rising above your petty differences to look at to focus on the greater problem. So maybe you could do something like that. That might be cool.
There needs to be it's helpful when there is a bad guy and there is a reason, bad guy who's worse than the other things. So
And it
yeah.
doesn't have to be a bad guy in this case.
Well,
Um,
because in this case, it's just a thing. If it's just
it's
literally a
this
force meant to
amorphous
be, yeah.
force. It's this. It's
Um,
who knows what it
the
is.
the awkward thing with something like that is it's like, what is there that the good guys, essentially the players, whoever else can do that's going to stop that? So then you need a reason thing. But it might be just like accepting that some of these, if it's a multiverse thing, some of these are going to just go. Because the other thing, I might just go, right, well, to forget a whole multiverse, let's just go something. But again, they say now I'm thinking I'm going to end up to something else like, oh, let's go post-apocalyptic, because then you have excuses for there being cars and mechs or anything else I want. But let's throw magic, and then I've accidentally recreated rifts, which I
Yeah,
don't really
don't do
want to
that.
do.
You know
Yeah,
what? Maybe okay. A multiverse could be that there are like something things akin to planes where these different pantheons, like that's like you go into like the Egyptian pantheon's plane, and that's where like everything is Egyptian style. And
yeah,
the reason why everything is Egyptian style in ancient Egypt in Earth is like in that area of the world is where like our reality and that plane, that realm, the fabric between them is thin. And if you go northwest of there to Greece, it's thin there. And if you go west to Italy, they just ripped off the Greeks and they changed all their names. That kind of thing. So you have these places in the world where these other realities overlap with Earth, and that's like our reality. And so that's like you could say that's why those places look like that. So that when you go into, you go to Mount Olympus and you go into their reality, like everything is classical age Athens cranked up to 11.
yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing I consider like almost like inverse talk, where talk was like, there's all these other reality, and they've come into ours to go, right, well, no, ours was like that in the past because these other realities were here, and then they've all left. but there's somewhere you can go where it is
Yeah,
still all
you
that.
can access them.
But then I'd also want to like mess around with well, I don't know because you don't need to do time travel. But you like to be able to go, right. It'd be nice to go to a place where it's still like ancient Greek was, and it's always been like another progress. But there's another one that's like it's Greece, but it's like super far in the future Greece with like crazy fancy tech stuff. But then that doesn't come into our reality. But yeah, it's nice to have some kind of tying thing together that
Sure.
people are fighting over. But it doesn't have to be modern day, I think. But it could
Well, you
just
know
be
what?
again.
Maybe. Okay. How's
I
it
need
then?
to.
If
Last
you
thing I
want, if you
go
want
on.
far future Athens doing, like future Athens stuff, whatever. I don't know what that's going to look like, but maybe you would access that. Like any age of a place can be accessed through like the overlapped realm.
Yeah.
So like if you want to go to modern day London or London, when Henry V was king, you would have to go through or whatever. I don't know if there
Yeah.
you have to go through some kind of like Celtic pantheon realm. Like that would be you'd step into that world and then there'd be the doors to all the other time periods from there. So you could have people doing funky monkey adventure, like all the adventures, all the action, or most of it would probably take place on Earth, but in different places and time periods on Earth, and it would all be fighting. And maybe it wouldn't be time travel ish per se, but it would be like this kind of weird dimensional overlap where you're fighting entropy in all these different
I
points
think
and
it needs to be
places and
it
time.
helps to have like one of the things that Feng Shui got right is that they have different, Feng Shui has different time periods, but it has very fixed time periods. So like they have super very precise, you have the modern day, there's this sort of there's maybe two future ones, and then there's sort of two or three, there's like ancient China, and then there's like, I don't know, let's say 1500, I don't, I'm guessing, but you only had those time periods and that was it, and you could only go to those points in the timeline, and if you did stuff it would slightly alter the future because they were so far apart. It wasn't like you were changing, you couldn't go back and like, oh, let's kill Hitler, because that wasn't one of the time periods they were messing around with. So if it's more like it's an idea of a particular period that you can go and play in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like having the whole idea of trying to have a multiverse or stuff is almost like trying to complicate, like just like I want everything, and I think I've always like, whereas you've gone the opposite. You've gone, I mean, you've got multiple time periods, but you've gone, I want to do horror, and not this kind of horror, and if I'm not going to do kind of like, you've done a much better job of, this is what I want. I have an idea of what kind of characters I want to be able to play, but I need to work out a setting that links it all together,
You know
which
what?
is harder said than done. But
I think what you might want to try to do is instead of trying to go top down, you have an idea about the types of characters and the types of action they might be in, things they might be involved in. Why not take, write out a couple of descriptions, like write out a couple of short character sketches so that you have something to work with, and then dive into one place. Like if you were to do something where, okay, I have my person who's been like powered up by or like represents works for Hermes, someone else works for Anubis, someone else works for some like Japanese god or something like that, and they've got to go deal with some kind of like the agents of entropy are, doing something in Germany. And so they have to go either is it modern day, is it future, is it past? But where they deal with the agents of entropy could be like our reality, wherever it is on a timeline, or it could be in like this weird overlap zone with like whatever, weird Germanic deities and things like that there are. Maybe you try to come up with something like a short adventure, because then you
yeah,
start working out the on the ground details, and then you might be able to suss out of that bigger picture ideas instead of trying to go from the big to the little.
I've got the vague ideas of like a big thing. Let's start with, one realm, and there might be other ones, but I don't worry about them. Let's just go with one. And then what do the characters in that one look like? And then what's going on in there? Because then if you want to throw in other stuff later on, you can. But yeah, not try and do every, because like you said, trying to come top down sometimes it's just you end up with too much stuff. So a bottom up,
You try to
and
answer too
develops at
many
the bottom.
questions and come up
Yes.
with too much coherence, and there's just too big of a scale to deal with.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
actually,
mean,
you know
like,
what? I am not a multiverse kind of person. Uh, But this actually sounds interesting because you would have all that cool source material of all these different pantheons and gods and demigods and junk like that from our own real history. That'd be kind of cool to activate those, to use
I,
that, and then there'd be a lot of stuff that you flat out wouldn't have to make up.
no, I'm kind of thinking what I'd probably come round to is kind of going, right, let's the starting point was like, 2000 years ago on our Earth, this stuff did actually, all this stuff was on Earth. And then for whatever reason, they were kicked off our Earth. So the setting won't be our Earth. But there's another alternate version of Earth where they never left. And they're still there and they're still causing trouble. So the gods are around being dicks because that's what gods do. And so, like, the map of the Earth looks similar, but huge chunks of it would be completely different because the gods have been living there tinkering with it for 2000 years. Um, and then I like the idea of that, and then you have something akin to the version of the UN of like, these gods have made an agreement that we won't mess with each other because we've signed up a thick piece of paper that says we're all going to be nice, apart from, Russia, because they can ignore the rules. And then have, the players working for an agency that is sent on when, someone's being a dick or something else is happening that shouldn't be. And actually, I like the idea of this entropy force, which is kind of eating away at it and eating away at parts of the thing, destroying parts of this thing. And it might be the whole thing's a lost cause, but it could be in the background that there are there's another place where that's where all the Greeks just live, and it's just the Greeks, and there's no one else there because either that's where they came from, or they've conquered it. But the main world would be it's a mix. It's like if the gods never left and have been warring over us for
Mm.
2000 years, or maybe I'll just dial it forward into a little bit because actually it doesn't matter if the gods have been around for 2000 years. There might be places which are still properly retro because they don't like technology, and other places where their technology
Yeah,
is further through. So I think
cool.
and then I can just worry about one world. The other stuff, it would
I
be people
I think
talking
that
about it.
I think
Easier.
if you pick one and build out, because like I said, you will probably establish some ideas and some like themes that you could then build on to say, oh, it's like this here. What's the analogy in this other one? So that's what I would do. I mean, I think
This is
the
where the
biggest
funny
world
thing
building
is that
mistake you can make is start at the top level
yeah,
and stay there.
this is where actually going right. Actually, using America is a good idea because most of you want a place where all of these gods and stuff are from somewhere else, and so everyone's an outsider. Except, actually, if I go back far enough, you do have Native Americans who do
Yeah.
have their gods and their things. So I need to find somewhere else in the world where that didn't happen. But I can't think of anywhere in the world that has never had any kind of ancient gods at all, apart from the UK because our ancient gods are boring. But yeah, still. Sorry, the Celtic and ancient British gods are all dead because they sucked. Yeah, but yeah, that's give me some
You
ideas
know
about it.
what?
But
Maybe okay. Maybe I thought thinking America, you could maybe in the maybe in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, when immigration from Western Europe and late 1800s, a significant amount from China as well. When those big waves of immigrants come in, maybe the gods who like come with them, like on their shoulder or in their, stuffed in their suitcases or things like that, buried in the back of their psyches. Those gods are like, ooh, we have an opportunity. They could worship us again, and so they're trying to like reassert themselves. So you have the activity of, in like Jupiter Zeus is busy in Little Italy in New York City, trying and failing, trying to like gain some traction. And you could potentially have some like Chinese, deity, demigods and junk like that out in the Old West. Maybe there's that opportunity. I don't know. Although that might end up being a completely different thing entirely.
yeah, that's the kind of thing you could take the premise and you throw it into another alternate version. Going, what it's a what if, isn't it? It's another what if thing. But yeah, they're definitely. But I like the idea of putting this together, but trying to stick it to one world and not worry about trying to
Yeah,
bring everything
don't
into
don't worry
one.
about the big picture. Develop
Yeah.
one, come up with some thematic like inclinations, and then you'd be able to apply those elsewhere and make sense of them. So my job is to think about a fear my job is to think about my game, but also to think about like fear stuff and mechanics, like try to nail that down. And your job is to narrow your idea a little bit
Yeah.
so that you can think of some mechanics that would be applicable and
And a good
appropriate
thing, like I
for it.
said, actually coming up with an idea for what an adventuring party would do, and also like 6 characters, because then when I'm coming up with, because then when we're like going to say, right, the kind of core mechanic I want is, you need a core mechanic that will work with a fear system and a horror game. I need a
Yep.
core mechanic that will let the characters that I've got ideas for do the things that I want those
Right.
characters to do.
That sounds good. That sounds good. So then in the future we'll focus these a little more and we'll start to make some mechanical and system choices.
So don't forget to like, subscribe,
Right. Join the
join the
conversation.
conversation. Yeah, on
Buy
both
the
Discord
collapsible
and
drinking glass, all that stuff.
yeah, sign up for the cults. Send us your, I was going to say babies. I thought that might sound really
Cabal.
bad. Oh yeah, it's a cabal.
It's
Sorry.
not a cult, it's a cabal. Thank you, as always, for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can join our Discord, you can subscribe to the podcast, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes. Thanks again. Have a great day. We look forward to talking with you.